Everybody, what's up? How you doing? Welcome back to the show. I'm Danny. We got Steve, and we got some guests. Everybody, welcome in Juanita Baptiste and Don Brown.
I
Y'all
am
want to
very
introduce
excited
yourselves?
this happy Friday. Excellent topic today.
Oh, is it Friday already? Wow.
Yes, all day, at least until 11:59 midnight, somewhere around there.
Sure.
All right, so we'll let the guests do intros first. Go ahead, Juanita. You're up.
Hi, everyone. My name is Juanita Baptiste. I am a program manager on the Autopilot team.
And hi, everybody. My name is Don Brown. I'm a program manager on the Customer Acceleration team in Intune, CAT, as we like to call it. Glad to be here.
Steve, all yours. Go for it.
So today we're going to talk about a really, really hot topic that's been at top of mind, especially for a lot of our customers who have been, transforming over to the world of modern management and cloud-based management, especially over the last 18 months within the pandemic. Modern device provisioning with Windows Autopilot. And so I couldn't think of two better sources to have on today's show than Juanita and Don Brown, as I like to call him, the Don Brown as well, as he's known on Twitter. But I think we have a huge amount of interest in this topic. The product is constantly evolving and the service is constantly evolving, and it's quite feature rich. But I'm sure many of our customers are going to want to know some of our recommended practices as well as what could possibly be coming down the pipeline as well. So that's why we wanted to have you two folks here today. And since this show is obviously not about me and Danny, I will go ahead and turn it over to you guys as well to kind of talk about what's going on today in the world of Windows Autopilot.
Sure. Wanted to keep this presentation pretty high level, so if you have any questions throughout it, feel free to ask. We can pause and clarify some points. So yeah, we can get started.
All right.
And as always, please use the Q&A to leverage your questions, and Danny and I will be monitoring the Q&A, and from time to time we may bring up some of the questions as well. And again, remember the scope of this is generally around the world of Windows Autopilot and, of course, device provisioning as well.
All right, I'll run the slides for you. We need to go for it.
Yeah, sure. So Windows Autopilot, let's get started.
Oh, I guess I said I should run the slides and I need to click the button. It's too early.
Wait for it.
Okay, so I don't know the scope of the audience, so I just want to start with the overview of what Autopilot is. So it's a collection of technologies used to set up and pre-configure new devices, mostly used by enterprises and IT admins to quickly set up a device for an end user. You can go to the next slide. So how Autopilot works. So on the back end, the IT admin will set up profiles, apps, and set up all the configurations that they would want for the device in an MDM like Intune or whatever MDMs they decide to use. Once those profiles are set up, those configurations are right, they'll send the device to the user. The end user will log in, and depending on which mode the IT admin has set up for the user, once they log in, the setup continues and it completes. And once that happens, the device is ready to be used and remotely managed. So there's no more re-imaging of a device. There's no wiping the OS, reloading it. So it just takes all of that out of the process.
Yeah, and I think, Juanita, one of the things that's interesting to define a little better, because you always hear this phrase, modern device provisioning, and it sounds like it would be super meaningful. And to unpack that a little bit, I think really it's helpful for people to understand that the modern part of this is not that we're rewriting OSD for cloud delivery. That's why we're getting away from imaging in general, but really that the way that in the the things IT admins do to provision the device so that a user can have it in their hands and be productive has been reimagined for the cloud first world. And just like you said, there are some configurations and profiles that can be applied to the device before it's or while it's being shipped out directly to the user. There's no more need to have a device imaged and the user, be without a device for a long time until they can make it to the office to go by their local, IT tech help desk kind of thing. So, it's super useful, I think, to differentiate when we say modern device provisioning. That doesn't mean, re-image it and then send it to a user directly. That means it can come straight from the OEM directly to the user. So, just thought I'd give you that point and see if there's anything that the next slide could potentially add to.
Thanks, Don. So just kind of continuing into that, like Don mentioned, it could come from the OEM, it could come from a reseller, it could come from the IT admin. Either way, the profiles and such still need to be set up within Intune or whatever third-party modern device management solution you're using. So if we dive into the scenarios for Autopilot, there's different ways that you can deploy them. And since we do have so many different ways, I kind of wanted to break down which key points of each method so that you can clearly see what we recommend and where we recommend doing it. So we have three methods. Well, two main methods, user-driven and self-deployment mode. And within self-deployment, there's pre-provisioned devices and shared device/kiosk mode. So for user-driven, that just allows the users to kind of drive the provisioning process. The IT admin still configures everything on the back end, but there's probably a few more clicks that the user needs to do. For pre-prov, the IT admin or the OEM does a lot of the setup work. All the configuration goes through the device setup before the user gets the device. And for shared device mode, there's no user assigned and it can be used for multi-use device. One of the things that people kind of get caught up on is the TPM attestation requirements. Sometimes people want to dive into pre-prov and to make it easier for their users, but then they realize that their device does not meet the TPM 2.0 attestation requirements. But that's only, you can always use user-driven mode if your devices don't meet those requirements. But I just wanted to call it out here as an option. Sorry, Don, were you gonna jump in?
Well, no, really what I was going to say was that the extent of a user's involvement in user-driven mode is pretty minimal, isn't it? Do they just type in their username and their corporate credential and away they go? Is there anything else the user needs to worry about? It
just takes a little bit more time for the user because they have to go through the device setup and the user setup, whereas in pre-prov, the IT admin or the OEM will go through that device setup for them.
I see. Sure, of course. Do you see that IT admins tend to gravitate towards the user-driven mode or the self-deploying mode more, or is it pretty equal from what you've seen?
From what I've seen, I've mostly seen user-driven mode. It really depends on the organization and what they want to do for the user. So pre-prov is a little more work for the IT admins to do because it does require physical touch. It does require having the device. User-driven, not so much, right? There's nothing that they really need to physically set up on the device. So it kind of just depends on the org, where they are in their deployment journey. So sure. I think user-driven is probably the easiest to get started with. And because there are additional requirements for pre-prov, and the other self-deployment modes.
Yeah. So pre-provision is what we used to call, I'm sorry to use this phrase, white glove, right?
Yes.
Okay. Yeah. So we figured out that pre-provision was more of an accurate description of the kind of personality that the device gets from corporate. Do you feel like that is a really good option for those companies that are not ready to go full OEM directly to user? Like, maybe they've got a whole bunch of employees that used to sit in a lab and work on a stack of machines all day, re-imaging them and packing it back up and sending it out. Do you think pre-prov is pretty useful for keeping those folks busy?
Yeah, it will definitely keep those folks busy. Like I said, it does require physical touch from someone to do it. So they can definitely set up a bench and knock out a ton of devices if they need to. The cool thing with pre-provisioning is once you start off the process, it kind of just goes on its own. It's not like they need to monitor the progress the entire time. But yeah, if you have the physical IT presence, or you want the OEMs to do all of the pre-setup for you for your employees, pre-provision is definitely the way to go.
Right. And now in later releases of Windows 10, we no longer have the hallway of Cortana talking to each other kind of videos that we can capture, right?
Yeah.
No Cortana and Ubi.
No Cortana and Ubi.
Sad to see her go, but we really didn't need to have a lot of that going on, at least with companies.
Mm-hmm.
So can you tell me a little bit more, or tell the audience a little bit more about the shared device option under self-deployment?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so the shared device option for self-deployment, that's for items like kiosks, digital signage, those sorts of items. It's not supported for hybrid Azure AD join scenario, so that's the only scenario where we would not recommend using this option. But this is for like faceless accounts. There's no assigned users. There's no one that needs to log in. The user is assigned on the back end, and it just goes through deployment. The only physical touch that would be needed is if you're connecting it to Wi-Fi. But if it's connected through an Ethernet port, there's no physical touch required during that mode.
Sure. What I'm hearing from a lot of companies is, as they are preparing to have employees coming back into their physical locations, what they've done is reimagine what a workspace is like and go to a system where nobody has an actual assigned desk or workspace, but instead there are these machines that are, for lack of a better term, tied down onto the desk that anybody can walk up and use. You think that would be what we mean by a shared use kind of device profile, or is it a little more specialized for kiosks like in a hotel or things like that?
It's still shared use. I'm not sure if that would be okay for multiple device users logging in and saving information. Kiosks and shared devices are usually have a single purpose.
Sure.
A repeatable purpose, I should say. So if you're going to do that with multi-users, I just kind of want to know, I'd want to dig into that more to know, okay, what are the users using this device for, and how can we apply policies to make sure that this device is secured?
Absolutely.
A kiosk or a digital signage device doesn't, there's no lockout time. You don't want those devices to be locked out, right? So there's different policies that are applied. Certain users in certain groups have different security policies as well. So if you have different users coming in from different groups using the device, how would you apply those policies? So I'd have to know more about what the use case is before I could recommend that as a solution for multi-users.
Sure. And, like you pointed out, for, shared use device like that, there wouldn't be any user affinity with the device. So some of the things you would traditionally do for user and or device management, like assigning apps to a user to follow them around, or compliance policies specifically for zero trust kind of configuration. All things that are additional wrinkles you have to think through when there is a shared use PC.
Right.
So that's super valuable to keep in mind, I think, for IT admins, to just make sure that, hey, this may sound like exactly what modern workspace could be like, but there are some extra configuration things that IT admins need to keep in mind for this this kind of scenario.
Yeah.
So great.
Ready for the next slide?
Yeah. So just to talk a little bit about the enrollment status page, it's not required for Autopilot. But it is something heavily used within the Autopilot provisioning process by a lot of orgs. So I just wanted to kind of touch on this, since the demo I will be doing later will involve the setting in this. So the enrollment status page is just a display for the users to kind of view while their device is doing the provisioning process. So within Intune, or whichever MDM you're using, the ESP offers many customizations. So you can, block users from accessing the device. You can specify which apps you want to block the users on. So, if you have like 4 core security apps that you don't want the user getting to the device to until those installed, you can block the user from accessing the device until that happens. Or you can let them, even here, you can let them bypass the ESP process if it fails, and allow them to continue to the desktop. But one of the things I wanted to call out here specifically is it allows it for Windows 11. It now allows you to view the diagnostic results for the
Yeah, that's a big thing. A lot of the feedback that the customers I've been talking to through Autopilot scenarios is around, if things don't go exactly as planned, how do we communicate to users? And IT admins would say this: how do we communicate to users to collect information to tell us what they're seeing on the device? And so this particular feature that you're talking about coming with Windows 11 is super huge.
Yeah, that was a kind of a top ask from everyone, OEMs, IT admins, is we don't know what's happening during the Autopilot process. We don't know where failures are happening. The logs are difficult to read. We have to contact Microsoft support. So with this diagnostic page, we're trying to put those insights into the hands of our users so that they can be empowered to know more about the process, more about what's going on, and what they can do to remedy it. The page does not tell you what to do to remedy it. I'm sorry. It does not tell you what to do to fix it. But, if you see an application that's failed, then that's what went wrong in the process.
Yep, exactly right. Yeah. And so just to be clear about what our direction is, are we targeting the user-driven deployment profile for this first, or where does it fit?
Yeah, so the scope of this is initially on user-driven AADJ devices. This is just us putting it out there, getting feedback from users on it. So yes, it's currently just user-driven. I'm not going to say that.
Well, I'll go ahead then, Juanita. So you said, hey, send us feedback. How do you want IT admins to give feedback into the team for this?
That's a good question. If you do have a CAT representative, that's a great way to give us feedback. If not, we actually also monitor the smiley face buttons in the Intune blade.
Send a smile.
Yeah, send a smile. Sometimes it's a frown, and when I read the verbiage, it's okay. But we do monitor that feedback. We actually do read those notes, so you can send us feedback that way as well.
Yep. User voice might be another great place to, very clearly articulate the things you're seeing, and give us advice about emerging trends that are out there, because all of those are seen by a person too, and are definitely you can upvote other user voice items that you see, which are potentially impactful for you in the scenarios that you're trying to administer around. So another piece there. The send a smile is great though. That's it's there's one option in it though. If you want your feedback to be anonymous, don't check the box that says Microsoft can contact me. If you want to, you could do a cheap shot, but that really isn't actionable feedback for anybody. But if you want to start a dialogue with us and give us these kind of ideas, like, hey, does this thing work for you? Does this not work for you? What's missing from it? Those are things that we can grab onto and really drive improvement into the process all up. So. Yeah. That's a great start.
Okay. Yeah, ready for the next slide?
Yeah. Actually, I have one other question for Juanita, if we can linger here for a little bit. So one of the things that has happened within the last couple of weeks here is we now have a Windows 365 release that goes out, or that's available for folks. And if you've been following the news on that, the demos, the sign up for demos has been frozen temporarily. But one of the things that is a useful technique is the little option in the user enrollment status page that makes it so that user ESP doesn't just apply to out of band or out of box experience, like brand new physical device. Juanita, do you think we're going to see a lot of the user ESP for device form factors like Windows 365 in the future?
I can't speak to the future, but it's definitely a possibility. ESP is, like I said, it's not just used by, you don't have to have Autopilot to use ESP. It's part of the Intune experience. So yeah, I don't see why it wouldn't be in the future used by more technologies, but I can't speak to it for sure right now.
Sure. Well, I'm bringing it up because regardless of the form factor of Windows device you have access to, whether it is a laptop or a tablet or some kind of slate device or streamed over the internet kind of presentation of Windows, the user ESP is something IT admins can leverage to apply a more prescient corporate personality onto that Windows experience for their users. So it's something to think through. You of course need to have AD Connect set up, synchronizing users there, and then you target the user ESP at a group or individual users. But something for IT admins to keep in mind, to explore, to give us feedback on, see if it works for the scenarios that you're chasing after, and help us think through what it means for you.
Yeah.
All right, cool.
Thanks, Don.
All right, we're getting some good questions, so let's let's get through.
You want to pause and
PowerPoint.
answer?
Sure. Let's go ahead. I guess, Steve, what's a good first question you want to lob out there?
So yeah, we've got quite a bit here. So I'll just start from the top. Danny went ahead and went there and addressed the most controversial item that we knew would be talked about today. And we there was a lot of discussion about should we go there. And so Adam ripped that Band-Aid right off and Danny answered it. We're talking about Danny's decision to shave his beard, of course. Now that we've gotten that out of the way, the elephant in the room has been addressed, we can actually move on.
I don't match the avatar anymore, right? Two-factor authentication.
So
you're next, Steve, by the way.
Adam also asked, what strategies do you suggest for working with an OEM VAR, et cetera, to ensure that machines are built and configured for their needs? What should we ask them? What capabilities do they have access to? I would imagine this is to ensure that the end users have the best possible out-of-box experience. How can OEMs and VARs help with that regard?
Sure. So are they wanting the OEMs to pre-provision the device for their users, or are they ordering the devices to send to the user? So if I'll just talk to both. So if you're going to have the OEMs or the resellers pre-provision the devices for you, they should be able to tell you what are like recommended settings or what are common settings they're seeing other customers do, and they should be able to ask you your needs and what you want. You still need to set up the profiles. Well, they can set up the profiles as well. They can do that in Partner Center, but you should be going with them through each profile to understand what your end goal is for your user. What is the end user experience you want to achieve? And that should be a conversation that you have with your OEMs or resellers up front to make sure that you're making the right decision on which capabilities to turn on or turn off.
Yeah, that's a really good point. Keep in mind what the end user experience you want to achieve is, and then work from there.
The second question, Autopilot's not supported on Windows 10 Home Edition. Typically, education customers will get Home Edition on new machines and then upgrade to EDU under their volume license or M365 agreements. Do we have plans to add support for Home Edition?
At this time, we do not have any plans to add support for Home Editions.
I will save some of these questions because I think you're going to be addressing them. What are the use cases for multiple ESP profiles?
Multiple ESP profiles for one device?
I'm going to assume in general, obviously device taxonomies would play into the scenario here.
So a device can only have one profile. If you have more than one targeted to it, it's just going to pick one. It's not going to bring down all the profiles. So the reason why you would want to have different profiles is it depends on your org, right? It depends on how it's set up, how your users are set up. You might want to give one set of, like, your finance department may have a set of specific apps that they need to have every employee installed, but your engineering department doesn't need all of those finance apps on their devices. So there's different levels of how people will split the profiles in ESP. It kind of just depends on the business decision, because ESP, there's so much configurations that you can do. You can have different timeout sessions. For example, if you have a group that they have an app that takes forever to install, you can increase the ESP timeout for that profile specifically for those users, so that ESP isn't constantly timing out on them and they're having to restart the process. So it just depends. There's also profiles for HoloLens, so like different devices. There could be different device setups that you want. There could be different geos, because you can also set languages in ESP. So if you have different geolocations for your group, you might want different profile setup as well. So there's a ton of different reasons to set up multiple profiles. It just depends on how complex your org structure is.
Right. Yeah, and I'll add, if I can, that from when working with customers, what I've seen the most for that is the user ESP being able to specify a different set of apps. So say a user is in the finance users group and they get a new device delivered to them, and because of who they are, they will end up getting a different user ESP experience than perhaps R&D type of person sitting in the desk right next to them. So you're exactly right. That's what customers are telling us, that the specialization at the user phase is why you would have different ESPs.
Right. Yeah.
Let me do one more question and then we'll move on to the next one here, This is a great question. Is Autopilot the only way to provision a device? What if I can't get my OEM to register my device for me? What are my options?
That's a good question. Autopilot is not the only way to register a device. You can still use SCC to register or to provision?
Well,
Provision.
let's just say provision. I'll read into the question a little bit.
Okay. Okay.
Yeah.
So you can still use the traditional methods, the OSD deployments. You can still do that. You actually you don't even need Autopilot specifically. It's just all the configurations and all the different technologies that make up Autopilot. It's usually tailored towards like a lot of, enterprises, education, professional environments. But if you want to simplify it, you can still kind of go through, if you just want to domain join devices, right? Like you don't want all these apps or all these other things to be installed. You can still use Intune to, have devices join your tenant and, secure your policies that way. The Autopilot provisioning experience just basically encompasses all the technologies an IT admin would typically set in an enterprise environment. And it's just kind of making that in one seamless flow without any physical touch or without it taking, however long your OSCs would take. But yeah, there's just Autopilot is not the only way to provision a device. That's just what we're talking about today.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I guess it's kind of a collection of technologies that's there for IT admin to exert, control over the devices in an automated way and collect all of the things together in one convenient place that they need to do to get a device provisioned. But yeah, you're right. You can definitely do those things manually if you like. If there's some other, bit of tech that you do to the device in between steps, maybe this is an opportunity to identify those and tell us, hey, we need to do these other things in addition to what Autopilot is giving us. So it's a great opportunity. Let us know.
Cool. They want to get back to the PowerPoint. I think it was just a few more slides left. Then we'll come back for more questions.
Okay.
Sound good?
Mm-hmm.
All right, let's see. I have no clue what this picture was. But
It's supposed to be a video.
Oh, okay. Let me see. Can I play it? It plays.
Okay, so yeah, this is the diagnostic page that gives you more insight into the Autopilot provisioning process. So here's a demo on what it looks like in Win 11. So to access the page, you need to enable the diagnostic setting in the ESP profile and using the Win shortcut Control-Shift-D, then it'll pull up this page. So it contains like three main categories: config info, deployment info, and apps and policy status. So right now on the page, you're seeing the config info category, and it just shows unique info about the hardware properties of the device. So like name, OS build, time zone, serial number, manufacturer, things like that. So that's what you would see here. Is it still playing? It kind of paused on my end, so I can't see where it's at.
Danny?
Got it paused on my end too, actually.
Looks like the videos may be frozen too.
It's fine. I can just continue to speak to it. Yeah. So the deploy. We broke Danny. Yeah, so the deployment info, if the video had continued, when you expand it, it shows more details on where the device is in the Autopilot process. So that's been a common ask that we've gotten from customers too, is like, we don't know what Autopilot is doing or where it's failing. So this kind of highlights the deployment info, specifically highlights how it's going through the process. So if you see like a green check mark, it indicates like the process was successful. Red arrow obviously means that it failed, but orange, if you see a status of orange, that means the process is unknown or incomplete. So I hit the shortcut pretty early in the ESP process, so you're going to see a lot of orange bangs to it because it hasn't completed most of those tasks. but it tells you, it goes through each one. Okay, now it's moving. It goes through each one and indicates where it is in the process. We are also working on additional features of this to enhance it. So like, maybe it's in chronological order, because if you expand it, you can also see the timestamp of when it started, when it ended, so you know how long a specific task is taking. So if your ESP is taking longer than usual, you can pull this up and see which task is not complying. Danny, did we get you back?
I'm back. I guess I'm doing some editing before I post the video because,
Okay. No, it's fine. I was just speaking to what it would have showed if it had continued. Wasn't sure if you were coming back. So
there
yeah.
it is. It's planned, so
Okay,
it's going
there
through
we
it
go.
now.
Yeah, so as you can see under like deployment info, right? This is user-driven mode. So you'll see like a check mark that said skipped TPM at a station, because obviously that's not needed for user-driven. So you can see the tasks that were completed, the task that's in progress right now, and the other tasks that will have the orange caution that hasn't been completed yet. And the apps and policy status, they just display the progress of the apps and policies. And like I said, if you expand it, you can see the start time and the end time. So there's also the capability to export this file. It's actually in a JSON format, so it's the same format that you're seeing on the screen. The same user-friendly check marks and stuff is what will be displayed in the JSON file. So you can export the logs to like a local folder or a file share if you want to look at it further. And also with the log collection feature in Intune, this JSON file is part of the MDM diagnostic logs. So you would be able to collect that when you do the log collection. So yeah, that's the new feature in Win11 for Autopilot.
Nice.
That's awesome.
Yeah, that's going to help out a lot of customers, go forward. Troubleshooting, understanding what's happening within that back-end system there.
Yeah, especially pre-enrollment stuff as well. Absolutely. Do we want to address some of these questions, because we have a few of them piling up again?
Go for it.
If we make a user a standard user with the enrollment status page, how do we configure other admins on the machine for things like IT admin access? Don, what are your thoughts there?
Well, one of the first things that jumps to mind is there is a setting in Azure AD where you can identify users who are administrators of Azure AD joined devices. So that's an option to be able to say, oh, help desk is, these help desk users are going to be admins on remote machines. Another option, which is showing up in some of the later builds of Windows, is the ability for us to manage local users and groups through the CSPs, the configuration service providers. And so that's something that we're working on. We know this is a potential seam between manageability stories. We're working on that. We've got some things in flight to help with that right now. So those are the first two things that come to mind for me.
We're also getting a lot of feedback, and this a related question was asked on, a lot of organizations, when they direct ship devices to end users, they want to ensure that those devices are as secure as possible by default. And Harpreet asked a question: why is BitLocker not enabled as part of pre-provisioning? Are there any plans to make it part of the technical flow there? To where I assume the question is there any way that during pre-provisioning I can fully encrypt the device before it's resealed? I don't know. I'll take that as great feedback as well.
So Juanita, you had something to talk about with that?
That is something that we are investigating. That is an ask that we've gotten from a few different orgs as well, and that is something that we're taking a look at. That's what I'll say.
Yep. And I was just going to point out that when a device has an autopilot profile targeted to it, or the device recognizes that it has an autopilot profile targeted to it, the join operation to Azure AD doesn't automatically trigger BitLocker to activate. One of the pieces of feedback I've had a lot in the past is, why are retail devices automatically enabling BitLocker, but it's not enabled in an autopilot device? And the reason is that some customers have told us they need to use different encryption parameters for their corporate devices than the AES 128 that happens with retail devices. So we have the ability to apply BitLocker profiles there. And I think probably it has to do with where the key where the key is escrowed for the device. We need to keep it someplace off the device in the meantime, so before it gets to the user. So just speculation, of course, but as Juanita said, yeah, it looks like we're investigating that kind of scenario. So more to come soon, I think.
Excellent, excellent. So one final question, and then we can open it up for more discussion. Are there? We have a heavily upvoted question here. Are there plans to add quality and feature update installation as part of pre-provisioning?
That is something that we're looking at. Every org asks for this in a different way. So we want to make sure that the solution that we come up with is configurable and is what each org needs. Because some orgs want to be on the latest and greatest. Some others want to hold back a bit and do more testing and make sure they have everyone on a specific level. So it varies in terms of depending on who you ask what they'd want, but it is something that we're looking into, and it's a future roadmap item for sure. I don't have a date or anything like that. I'll just say that it's something that we are investigating.
Excellent, excellent,
All right.
excellent.
What else? Got any more good questions? Sorry for the video, guys. Well, Teams crashed on me and decided to come back weird. So we'll go ahead and get the questions out the way because I know that's what's important. The engagement's really good. Steve, what else we got? We got anything else?
Is there a capability to bulk add existing devices to Autopilot, like by policy? For example, as a preparation step for moving from on-prem to Azure, was the question asked.
All right, so converting existing devices to Autopilot devices?
Yes,
Okay.
I assume that's the question.
Okay. So yeah, there's an option in the ESP profiles, in the Autopilot profiles that you can select to convert these devices to Autopilot. There's no way to do it like automatically. The user will still have to do a reset of the device, but that is an option there. But yeah.
There, I'll add to that, Juanita, that if IT admins, if you're running Config Manager today, you'll notice that there is a report that is generated from your Config Manager managed devices, which you can export right out into the CSV format. And then as you go about the work of modernizing those devices, reimagining how the end user experience is like, you can take that CSV and import that right into Autopilot, have a profile assigned for those devices straight away. It's a little bit of manual work, of course, but it helps a lot of admins bridge the gap between those. So that's another option. I've also seen, you know, out on the big bad internet, that people have developed some scripting kind of solutions for their managed devices, in case you're not using Config Manager, to collect with the PowerShell commandlets, to collect the autopilot info, have that script running, upload the CSV to some kind of Azure storage object or something like that, and then another process running someplace like a Power Automate workflow that will recognize a new CSV has gotten there, and then do the work of importing that into Intune directly as well. So there's options, depends on how creative you are and you know what your predilection for PowerShell is going to be, but lots of things people have imagined to take care of that stuff in addition to the automated stuff.
So I think that takes care of all of the questions so far. I'll keep monitoring the chat, but I have a question. You know, I love the option we have for autopilot with specialized workloads, and we kind of touched on that. The great thing with a lot of our frontline worker devices is, you know, IT pros can kind of set it and forget it with a lot of these specialized devices. And there was an article yesterday, as a matter of fact, about HoloLens and autopilot going GA, which is another example of the those specialized workloads for those FLW type devices. Are we looking to kind of expand that scope for more of those type of devices and specialized workloads, Juanita? Or what are we looking to do there?
We are. I can't say which devices right now, but it is something that we are actively working on to get those special workload devices into autopilot to make those provisioning processes more streamlined for the other form factors.
Cool.
Yeah, and I think the idea there is that whatever those other form factors are, that IT admins may not have to develop a new set of muscles to get those devices under management is one of the big messages that I've heard from customers, that they don't want to have to do different things for different kinds of Windows devices or Windows-like devices to get them under management, to get the corporate personality applied to them, and the security parameters set for the company. So that's a great thing to hear, that we're actually looking at and you know, investigating some other parts of the Windows ecosystem.
Yeah, so to just touch on that just a little bit more, is what we are working on is to try to make any additional form factors that we add, we're trying to make the process as close to the Windows autopilot as possible. So you'll still need to set up a profile, but the configurations for it might be slightly different depending on the form factor. For example, like HoloLens is only AADJ only. So when you hit the HoloLens profile, you don't get an option for, you know, to make it a hybrid device. So things like that will be a little bit, we'll have to tweak for each form factor. But the process we're trying to make, you know, as close to the Windows, it'll be as close to the Windows process as possible. So there's not like a new thing that they would need to do. It's still going to be a profile. You deploy the profile to the device and autopilot does the rest.
Awesome. What I found amazing about the HoloLens autopilot experience is just how amazingly fast it is, and quick and easy it is. And I'm sure that has nothing to do with my fiber optic network that I have, but it's a great experience, and I think it's really going to you know, make those devices easier to implement and integrate. We have another question that just came in from Harpreet. Is it okay to have multiple app types added in the ESP for installation as part of Autopilot, like mixing line of business with Win32 through the Intune management extension, along with store apps as well? What are your thoughts there, guys?
Mixing.
I'll let the experts go first.
So I do believe we have some articles posted, some docs posted about mixing apps. There's things to be aware of when you're doing that. You know, mixing line of business apps with Win32 apps, you're gonna get a different experience because, you know, Intune, Autopilot, it handles those apps differently. So you will get a different experience when you start mixing apps.
Yeah, that's true. Especially so with the store apps, because you need to be aware of where your targeting is. So if you're targeting a device group with an online only app from the store, you may get mixed results. Whereas, you know, some apps from the store for business support online or offline mode. And that roughly correlates to offline mode for devices and online mode, you know, for users. That you know, you need to keep some of those things factored in mind as well, in terms of, you know, Autopilot being able to orchestrate the install of all of those.
The key word there is orchestrate. You're exactly spot on, Don. And when we're talking about things that are going to leverage the Windows installer orchestrator, that's where we have to be careful. So if we're pushing a lot of apps through the classic, or what I call the legacy MSI line of business method, which uses the enterprise desktop app management CSP, I prefer custom method and not mixing both of them with an Autopilot, because what's happening there is you have the Intune management extension working with the Windows installer, and then of course you have the MDM CSP as well, and this is where they can potentially step on each other. So I encourage everyone to use the Win32 app method for anything that's MSI based, but again, your mileage may vary.
Yeah, I agree. Whenever possible, try to keep the same flavor of app delivery.
Yep, y'all both said exactly what I was going to say. I talk to customers all the time that use all of them. Sometimes they'll step on each other. More often than not, they will. But if you can consolidate to one or the other, things typically work a lot better. Better experience. All right,
So
Steve, if we got time for one more.
Yeah, this is a question, but it's also kind of a feature request as well. It's interesting. Harpreet says, I am hiding the user USP screen for the users when a device is provisioned so the user is able to use it right away after they log in. Are there any plans to add a message where in Autopilot it says that the device is provisioned successfully, so the user knows that everything has been installed and it is ready for use? Kind of like a little toaster thing that pops up in the right hand saying, all done. That's good feedback. Yeah.
Yeah, so that is feedback that we have gotten, and we're still trying to decide what's the best way to handle this, right? Because some users will go through the ESP, then they see the login page and they're not sure, okay, is the device ready or not? The thing is with like toaster notifications is they can be missed, right? Usually when someone's provisioning their device, they're not sitting in front of it the entire time. It's just not what users will typically do. So there is a chance that they will miss that toaster notification that the device is ready. That's something that we are investigating, but we're unsure about what's the best way to handle it so that the users would know that the device is ready without missing it. Typically, we present them with the login screen, and that's our indication that you're ready to log in. But we have had that ask from customers to make it more abundantly clear that the device is ready. So yeah.
All right, cool. Well, if we didn't get to any questions, we will follow up in the tech community channel. Thanks everybody for joining. Don, thanks. Juanita, thanks. Sorry about the crash on the video, but I'll fix it in post. We'll get it together.
Glad to be here.
Steve, any last parting words? Anybody last parting words?
As always, we appreciate the attendance, and we love the engagement, and keep it coming.
Yeah.
Great questions.
Yeah, this was super good on the engagement. It's probably one of our best ones. I think we've done 5 shows, and this is probably one of the best topics we've gotten. This one in analytics for sure. A lot of engagement around these. This is really why me and Steve do it, so we can get the feedback. This is just another way for us to get feedback, get the feature PMs on, and the people to hear the feedback to make the right changes that we need. Right, we develop for customers, so no better people to talk to, customers. All right, thanks everybody.